Right now, let's continue to bring you some reaction to the judgment of child molester Gerhard Ackerman. Yesterday, Ackerman was found guilty of numerous counts of rape, human trafficking, sexual assault, and the distribution of child pornography. The 52-year-old faced over 700 charges. Joining us now is child rights activist Patric Solomons. Thank you very much, Patric, for your time here on eNCA. Of course, quite devastating to see that the man that, with so much proof against him, he still was telling the court that he did nothing wrong. What do you think the sentence should be that is imposed on him?
Serial child sex predator, and it's quite horrifying and very disturbing when you listen to the charges the judge read out. He was charged with over 700 charges, crimes against children, sex crimes against children. And these include, of course, the creation, possession, the importing, facilitating, distribution of child pornography, the actual sexual abuse, sexual exploitation of children, as well as facilitating others to commit these kinds of crimes against children. So, he is definitely a serial rapist. And of course, he has no remorse. He don't believe that he's done anything wrong. And I think that comes through very, very clearly. I believe he's also intent to appeal against his eventual sentencing. And but I think it's very interesting that what the public need to know that he's a serial child sex predator, and he's been plying his trade for many, many, many years. And of course, one of his main culprits that helped him and facilitated this process with him, I committed suicide. But one of the big questions that we are asking ourselves, where are the other people that facilitated? Where are the other people who also abused and assaulted these children? Because it's very clear that he organized children through his massage parlor for other people, and so we hope that the investigation will continue, that this is not the end of this particular case. It involves a kind of a child sex ring, masterminded by Ackerman and some other accomplices. So as much as we sort of welcome this guilty verdict for those charges, and we hope that the full extent of the law will be applied here, that you will get the fullest possible sentence that will be applied to these kind of crimes. And these are crimes being taken very, very seriously by our court. You can see from previous sentencing hearings around similar kind of charges. And I think the message here is also very, very clear, that people who commit crimes against children can be charged with multiple crimes, where they think they might have just made one transgression, but they can be charged with crimes for facilitating the sexual abuse and exploitation of children. They could be charged with forcing others to do so, and they can also charge by even suggesting that something like that must be committed against a child. So this is also yes.
So what do you think in terms of the concern around how crimes like this can go unabated for many years in a country like South Africa, to find a person only being found, although good work, of course, by police and the NPA now, but to find a person such as Ackerman and his accomplices, like you say, being found about when it's already 700 charges, some of them have still not been arrested and have not faced the law. Your concern about, South Africa seeming like a country in terms of statistics where such crimes are prevalent and are allowed.
Yes, on the one hand, we are making great progress with our police and our investigations, also our prosecutions with regard to such kind of crimes. Unfortunately, a large number of these kinds of crimes and incidents go unnoticed. Although when we engage with people and when we talk to them about, didn't you know, did you hear something, did you see something, and they would acknowledge they heard, but they did nothing. And I think that's the big challenge that we have. And the challenge is, of course, also particularly with older children. We believe that they do have their own agency, and therefore we blame them when something bad happens to them. Something like this, when it happens to children who are 12 and older, we blame them. Of course, Ackerman also abused and had horrific material involving very, very young children.
Yeah.
right? But what we do find is that people often turn a blind eye when it's 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 15 and 17-year-olds, because they do believe that they have their own agency. But what the message here is that it is still a crime. It remains a crime.
Yeah.
If you commit sexual offenses against a 17-year-old and a 16-year-old and 17-year-old, that is of an exploitative nature, that is against the many of our laws that protect children, you should be identified, you should be charged, you should be prosecuted.
Yeah.
One of the other challenges that we have, of course, is the desensitization of sex with children.
Yeah.
The whole concept of blesser, sex in exchange for something, is something that permeates throughout all of our society. We work with
Yeah.
many, many children, and for some of them, it is normal and not unusual for someone to offer them a packet of chips, a cool drink, a
Yeah.
beer, a savannah, a cigarette, even drugs, money, cell phones,
Yeah, yeah.
data in
And I think
exchange
that's
for
why,
sex.
and perhaps that's why
So
he keeps saying that he did nothing wrong because the children knew, etc., etc. So this is someone who's not even realizing that he's admitting to this crime, especially looking at the fact that there are 11 and 12-year-olds that are part of his victim list. But let me ask you this very quickly. In terms of the concentration, right, for Ackerman going to jail, there'll be a huge concentration on rehabilitating him, which is, of course, the mandate of correctional services. But what about his victims and the concentration of trying to, counsel them so that somehow they have a normal life or there's normalcy in their lives? Do you think there's an imbalance in this where we concentrate on the perpetrator to rehabilitate them, but not necessarily to help the victim get through what's happened to them?
And most of our services actually is focused towards victims, social development support services, and healing and recovery services as largely focused. So we're doing fairly well at that level. Unfortunately, also there's a lack of resources, particularly in our under-resourced communities, where children, when something bad happens to them, a lot of them don't get any counseling, any support. Those who have access to some sort of services sometimes have to wait a week, a month, a year, even longer to have access. Sometimes we get referrals from different agencies, government agencies, NGOs, and then children haven't been counseled for more than a month, more than a year. And because they've experienced sexual trauma cases, children then often suppress these kinds of issues. And then a couple of years later, flares up in all kinds of dysfunctional behavior. We also come across, for example, situations where their very parents experience similar kind of experience that their children are going through now.
Yeah.
And they never received any intervention. Although on the one hand we've made good progress, we need to do much, much more. And we
Yeah.
need to present our services and focuses and increase them in our under-resourced communities, in our rural areas. Because it is in these kind of pockets we find that the incidence of these kind of crimes are also quite high, and the vulnerability of children put them at high risk for sexual exploitation.
All right, Mr. Solomons, thank you very much for your time here on eNCA. That is child rights activist Patric Solomons.